Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am Abe with MysticGenmara.com, and tonight is going to be a little bit different today. I just got off work, so I'm a little tired, but that's alright. Today's video is going to be a little bit different in the fact that I'm going to go over a few names that are generally misinterpreted or misunderstood, and kind of give a little insight as to why I feel that way. Now, I probably will get a little bit of backlash, and that's alright, because some of the terms that I'm going to be bringing up are ones that we've been trained from youth to be a specific way towards. So, with that being said, let's bounce on down this very bumpy road of the different types of names. Now, these are things that are very specific to the spiritual community. Some of them cross over into religious, alternative religious, etc. So, when we talk about names, what's the first thing that comes to mind? A title? A way to recognize somebody, a way to separate yourself from the group, be an individual. All of that's true. And names in the spiritual community, though, hold very specific energy or power. A title in a coven holds a level of respect for the knowledge earned and time committed to their path. Positions, degrees, and levels in ceremonial circles show a level of proficiency and power over the elements, the spirits, fill in the blank, but it's really about where they've gotten to, and in most cases those positions do carry a certain level of respect because they have put in the time. And this is where it gets interesting. In the solitary community, which a lot of people have taken the solitary path because you don't have a group close to you, or you don't connect with the group that's around you, which is totally understandable. And even in the solitary community, because it is a community thanks to the interwebs, titles tend to not carry as much weight, so they think they seem less important, as a phrase I hear a lot. But that is not correct. How you reference yourself in your own practice does affect your practice. And if you take on a title that you have not put in the time, effort, and energy to earn, two things happen. One, you actually belittle your own practice. And second of all, you make the group as a whole, like the entire community, look less. And we don't want that. No one wants that. No one wants to be in a group that's, being mocked or belittled continuously. And there's enough of that to go around. So, with this video, what I would like to do is break down, define some of these names, go over some of the terminology that we hear thrown around in pop culture. Hollywood's great for this, and some religions as well, and kind of go over a little bit of how I've come to understand them through research and in some cases practice, just because I want to understand them better. I don't usually take people's words when they say this one is wrong or this one is right. I want to find out why they feel that way. And so I go down my merry way, down the rabbit hole. So to start off with, because this was one of the ones that I first ran across and it really caught my attention right off the bat because it's one of the most misunderstood terms. Well, these two are very misunderstood terms, which is Wicca and Witchcraft. Everyone probably has heard those two terms at some point in their lives. If you've watched, like on TNT, there was Charmed. If you watch very many Disney movies, if you've watched historical stuff, if you read, The Crucible, you've come across these terms. Defined simply, Wicca is a spiritual path. Witchcraft is the practice of magic, nature magic specifically. Some Wiccans never practice magic at all. I've met some. They are strictly a spiritual belief system. They do prayers to divinity. they light candles, they really don't cross into what most people consider magic. And it's about spiritual development and a spiritual connection and a spiritual community for them. It's not about casting spells or any of that. That's not what they are into it for, and that definition is a little bit wonky at times, and I understand that, but their goal is spiritual in nature. Dictionary definition of a Wicca is a nature-oriented religion having rituals and practices derived from pre-Christian religious beliefs and typically incorporating modern witchcraft of a benevolent kind. Wicca and a lot of times Druidism are very similar in their practice because they come from a similar area in the world. Most of the what we would call Wicca movement started in Europe, which is where the Druids resided. And there is some very strong crossover there. It's, again, nature-oriented religion, having rituals and practice derived from pre-Christian religious beliefs. The difference is Wicca tries, for the most part, to be exceptionally positive, like the white magic, if you would call it that, where Druidism is a more neutral path, so they will walk what you would call a gray path. It's not light, it's not dark, it's something in the middle. And that's not negative, that's just what they are. Witchcraft, on the other hand, is defined as the art or practice of a witch, sorcery, magic, magical influence. And these two terms are very, very different, and people mix them up constantly. And it's not anything bad, it's just we've been taught a certain way. Oh, you're a Wiccan, so you're a witch, so you do all this witchcraft stuff. No, calm down. Wiccans are a different group of people altogether. It's like saying that you're Lutheran, Baptist. It's a branch of spiritual practice that is basically pre-Christian. But there's a term that popped up in that definition, and I've used it a few times in this video so far, and that's magic. So what is that? Let's look at it. Actually, there's more than one definition that we can use. The dictionary definition is the art of producing an illusion as entertainment by the use of sleight of hand, or the art of producing a desired effect or result through the use of incantations of various other techniques that are presumably assure human control of supernatural agencies or forces in nature. Basically, illusions or something the dictionary doesn't want to admit exists. Funny, they do a lot of that. One of my favorite definitions, though, and this is an all-time favorite because of how it's defined, is from Aleister Crowley. A lot of people hear his name, immediately think of either the Beatles or the wickedest man on the planet. Both are true. But Aleister Crowley was not just... There's a lot more to him, and I will discuss that in a later video. But let's just go with what his definition was. His definition of magic, and he actually started putting a K at the end of it, so it was M-A-G-I-C-K, because to him, M-A-G-I-C, magic, was illusions. Those are the card tricks. That's the making the dove appear out of thin air, quote-unquote. To him, that was a mockery of a very divine science. So he added the K to define the two separately, and a lot of people today will write it that way and not have a clue where it came from. It came from Crowley. But he defines magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. In a sense, magic may be defined as the name given to a science by the vulgar. Any required change may be effected by the application of a proper kind and degree of force in the proper manner through the proper medium to the proper object, which to me is the best definition you can apply to the term magic. Because what it's really saying in that he wrote a lot of stuff in an Old English style, even though it was more modern words. And what he was saying is, by learning the basics, understanding the elements, the angels, the spiritual realm, when you develop your will through meditation, through Tai Chi, through the yoga meditation, let me emphasize that, not exercise yoga, but meditational yoga, and qigong and all of these different practices and breathing techniques, you start to develop your inner will with a capital W. This is your spiritual force. This is that when you walk into a room and people's heads just turn and they don't know why, that person's basically soul energy has grown to that extent that people are drawn to it. So when you develop that will and that personal power, then you start to apply that with certain levels of force. It doesn't always have to be forceful. Sometimes it's very gentle. It can be just a brush. In the proper manner through proper medium. Now, when he uses the term proper medium, he's talking ritual work through using sigils. I won't get into all those details, but through symbols and signs, and sometimes it's with candles, sometimes it was with stuff that's drawn out on the ground. He did a lot to bring magic from the Dark Ages into the modern world. And when you're talking about degree of force in proper manner and proper medium to proper object, you wouldn't apply, let's say, a water-based magical formula to something with fire, unless you intended to destroy it, because their energy is complete opposite. So proper manner to proper object and medium. So there are ways to work within that degree, like you could use water with earth to affect the fire and it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But if you went straight water to straight fire, either you're going to put the fire out or you're going to have one heck of a backfire on you. And that was what he was talking about when he says that. But it's that knowledge gained through study, through practice, through meditation, that allows you to create change in accordance to will. With will, it's all under the law. The law is the law of love, but the law of love is based off of your connection to source God energy. So Crowley wasn't exactly a bad guy. He just made some epic mistakes. But his definitions of magic are very clear. It's change in accordance to will using the art and science that is beyond our modern science. Pretty simple, really. So going off the things that have popped up so far in terms, sorcerer or sorceress is someone who practices dark magic, dark arts, if you want to use the term a little less, a little more common tongue. It's using evil entities against another person. And this is a form of black magic if you're going to use the color coding system. Now, a sorceress, which is a female sorcerer, in a lot of different categories is referenced as someone who poisons. A sorcerer is generally someone who calls up demonic entities, evil spirits, and hexes people or curses them with this other spirit. A lot of the times when you read in the old texts about people who do this, it would lead to forms of possession, it would lead to some really messed up hauntings. These people did evil just to do evil. They could have cared less about the consequences, and they were always for sale. Whereas if you're going like with the white versus black magic, Wiccans will do positive spells, but they will not do dark ones no matter how much you offer them for money. It goes against their moral code. Sorcerers and sorceresses generally don't have a moral code beyond what makes them happy in the moment. They could care less about anyone else. Funny part is, we have people today who do that and don't even use magic. So then we bounce down to another term that is not exactly the most understood, because you have the term mage, which is, if you play D&D or if you've read the Dragonlance books or anything that Wizards of the Coasts have done, mage is very particular. But the one that gets confused a lot with it is magician. And people mix those two words up a lot, and they could be used by definition interchangeably, but when you actually look at how the word mage is used in most practitioners of the magical world, mage is someone who actually is a practitioner of these spiritual aspects. They're either practicing witchcraft, ritual craft, something along that lines, and they are basically doing it for their own benefit or spiritual growth. Whereas the term magician is that illusionist thing. They're the ones up on stage, they're the ones levitating people with a metal hula hoop, things like that. And that's a very, very talented person, don't get me wrong. Those take skill. but it's not the same thing as what a lot of people practice or are interested in. Then we move on to a term that, thanks to a certain series that was 7 books and 8 movies long, and is still going off with side projects, the term wizard. By definition, in the dictionary, is just a magic user. That's what they have to say. But what I have found in interacting with people who are wizards in the modern world, it's a term that someone who studies more than one magical path. They don't follow just the witchcraft, which is your daily earth-based magic. You're not going just with the ritual magic. You're not going just with the alchemy. You're not going just with any of them. You're really studying all of them, and you're working to become proficient or are proficient in more than one of those paths. I like to term it as a jack of all magical trades, so to speak. And in a lot of references, wizards are generally male, and it's very common for that term to be applied to male, whereas using the term witch is referring to women. Now, does that mean that you can't have back and forth? No, there's male witches and there's female wizards. It's just a lot of the main contexts in the old texts and even through today use wizard male, witch female. It's not. You pick the term that fits to you if you're studying more than one path, is how I view that. This one gets a little bit more interesting because in our modern world we do use this once in a while, but they interchange it with a very disgusting one, which is necromancer or necromancy. This term has really been demonized over time, and it's also been confused with necrophilia, and it's not anywhere near the same thing. Necrophilia is disturbing to say the least, and horrifying at the worst. But a necromancer is someone who communicates with those who have passed over, the dead, so to speak. In a lot of our modern day world, we would call them channelers, mediums, some form of a psychic that opens themselves up to the dead. I don't recommend it personally, but people do it. But a true necromancer is significantly more than someone who just talks to the dead. It was believed at one time, and this wasn't that long ago, we're talking like 1500s and before that a strong necromancer, and they were hated for this, could reanimate a corpse, reanimate a dead person. The fresher the corpse, the easier it was to reanimate. But a truly powerful necromancer could call back the soul of that person and attach it back to the body. And to say the least, when you read some of the old texts about necromancy, it's disturbing. It's not something that I would want to participate in or even witness, and I like learning new things. This is not one. From my research of it, it's definitely something that needs to be left to the dark, where it belongs. But part of what they believed could happen. Now, there's references to this actually working, but again, we're talking from the 13th century. So, was it an illusion or was it real? You can decide. But the belief was that the dead could literally sit up, crawl out of their grave, walk, answer questions about their lives only. They could not answer things about the other side, even if they brought the soul in, they could not answer other side questions because they're back in their body, so all of that was blocked out again. In some of the myths that I have read, and I call them myths, not legends, because I really question the validity of these. Again, that's my personal bias. But they could actually be used as weapons against the enemy of the necromancer. So the necromancer would call him up and be like, go get that guy. And then they would shamble off to kill whoever it was in their bed. Not the most pleasant of discussions, but it is a term that you hear randomly, and it's always misinterpreted or used incorrectly. There was a very, very complex ritual, and I will not go into it here except to say that it generally took the slaying of an animal, which is a lot of stuff used to happen that way, and it wasn't a quick thing. Like, a necromancer would have to prepare between 13 days and 30 days before they could call something up. So there was a lot involved in this, and that's why I say it needs to be left in the dark where it belongs. Now this one gets fun. This is a diviner. It has two different meanings. It can be a person who sees the future or communicates with the unseen world, like a medium, a channeler, or a soothsayer. But a diviner can also be a person who uses divining rods or pendulums to find water or things that are lost. If you ever see someone using a divining rod to look for water, pay attention. It is an extremely cool experience to watch. My grandpa always called it witching for water, and my grandpa was the type of person, and I don't talk about my personal life a lot on here, but this one's fun, who didn't believe really in anything. God existed, and that was enough for him. But he would talk about people who would witch for water. And he actually witched his own well, and I kind of shocked me because he was very much anti-anything woo-woo. Like, that just didn't go with him. But this one was, to him, a natural art, so he would use it. And when you watch someone who's using, when they're witching for water, I have seen people use the wands, the metal wands that look like big L's that they hold in their hand, and they'll like swing back and forth and cross over the water and separate when there's not. I've seen that, and that's pretty cool. But when you're actually watching someone with a piece of willow, generally it's willow when you're looking for water because willow attracts water really strongly. When you watch someone with a piece of willow that's like 2 inches in diameter and that limb bends completely in half to point down, there is the water, it will shock you the first time you see it. It actually shocks you pretty much every time because it's cool. But they usually call them diviners. And in some states, and this is just an odd law I found when I was learning about these beforehand, there are states where a driller cannot witch his own well. You have to have a separate person to witch your well. And so if you are someone who knows how to witch, you can't own a drilling company for drilling wells. There's actually laws in some states that forbid that because you're basically getting paid twice, and that's what they say no to. But it's a legally recognized profession to witch for water, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now, I've said soothsayer, channeler, medium several times. These are people that are interchangeable in their terms, and it goes to telling the future, communicating with the spiritual world. In some cases, a medium or a channeler will allow a spirit to fully possess the body. Their arms can move. A lot of the times they're sitting down, and they have the agreement before the spirit comes in that they're not allowed to get up. And when you're channeling or mediumships, you generally, that medium has a protective spirit that keeps anyone that comes in under control. And so full body channeling is not something you see very frequently, but these are the times when if you do ever get to see it, when the etheric substance that we know as ectoplasm can manifest. It doesn't always do it, and there are theories that it doesn't exist at all, but when it does happen, it's always during full body channeling or mediumship. You don't usually find ectoplasm showing up unless you're in that type of a situation. There's some interesting movies that have been made about the dangers and horrors of it. I won't go into those because they're actually horror films. But it is an interesting thing when you look into ectoplasm and how it occurs. Another term that pops up frequently here recently especially is the term light worker. This is a group that includes the starseeds, which are, your soul is actually a galactic soul. It came in to help uplift the planet at this time. The Indigo Children, which started in the early 70s or so and went very heavily through, from what my research comes up with, the late 80s, early 90s, as the Indigos. You're born with an actual indigo aura, or your dominant color of your aura is indigo. You tend to be highly empathic, and a lot of what we're seeing today with this modern movement, especially with people who are developing their clairvoyant skills or their clairs in general, is because they're indigos. The indigos are highly psychic. And then you have the Crystal Children, which generally, from what I'm seeing, popped up in the mid-90s and are moving up through today. They are very earth conscious. They are trying to find ways to work with the earth, and you'll notice that a lot of this new group wants to go live in the woods. They want to live in that type of an environment because it's connecting them back to the earth, and that's what they crave. So being on Earth during the recent years has helped shift the collective conscious into an extremely high frequency. And we're still moving, so don't think we're over yet. It's still shifting. They are bringing in the healing abilities and spiritual knowledge that is beyond their years. You'll see a lot of light workers who will discuss Lemuria and Atlantis like they were there, probably because they were. And they have abilities as young children that are with natural healing energy along the lines of Reiki, but it's stronger than what people have been practicing Reiki for 20 years can do. And so you'll notice that there's a pattern starting to form with this younger generation, and it's because of this building of this light energy that's been coming into the planet. There is where are we at here? There's another term that's been coming up, and it's interesting because if you watch certain movies, you'll see it a lot, and it's really not accurate at all how it's being used today, and that is warlock. In modern times, people try to apply it to mean a male witch. It's not true in the slightest. In reality, it was a damning term. This was a curse. You didn't want to be called a warlock. To be a warlock was an oath breaker, a deceiver, a liar. It's a negative term. The energy that goes with that name shows the person can't be trusted. A warlock was someone who took an oath or a vow to a group, church, coven, whatever, and either divulged their secrets or in some way defiled the group or the place of worship, and they were banished. Warlock was bad, very bad. And yet you see people throwing it around like, I'm a warlock. I wouldn't brag about that. Just saying. Going along that lines is the term Satanist. And we're almost done with this video. It's a little bit long. I do apologize for that. And this one's interesting. Satanist is basically a worshiper of Satan. Cut and dry, that's the basics. But even with that definition, there are extreme variances there. Anton LaVey, his version of Satanism was a defilement, mockery, if you will, of the Catholic Church. He set up the Church of Satan and actually wrote the Satanic Bible strictly to mock and make fun of the Catholic Church. Not so much other religions, that was the one he was picking on directly because of things that he witnessed as a child. Again, I will discuss more about LaVey at a later time, but it's a very established religion today, and it's actually accepted in a lot of circles. It's got very defined practices. I don't recommend reading it if you have a weak stomach because he gets a little wonky on some of his stuff. Like, it gets out there. But he's not as bad as people would think, which is a kind of a shocker, really. But then you have this atheist group that's running around right now called the Satanic Temple. Yeah, not impressed with those people, personally, just me. They disavow all forms of spiritual practice, and they don't believe in any entity. Angel, demon, Satan, God, they don't believe in any of it. Well, then why are you using the term Satan if you don't believe in him? It's weird. They are the ones that you see dragging around the statue of Baphomet, which is not satanic in general, trying to get a rise out of Christian groups. In most cases, it's Christian groups. I've seen some pagan groups come out against them as well. Real Satanists want to be left alone. They want to practice in private. You don't make scenes like that. Although there are individual solitary practitioners of Satanism that have some very dark practices, not going there tonight. Another interesting group is the Luciferians. You have the ones that worship Lucifer as a consort of Venus, the morning star, the bringer of light, destroyer of illusions and darkness, which is what the term Lucifer actually means. Then you have the Wiccans who use Lucifer as a deity, which is a lot like they worshipping a satanic version, but it's not Satan as in dark. There is a branch that believes that through Lucifer and his worship, you can become a little g god, like you can become an immortal that has powers. They aren't organized that I've found like other groups. They might be starting to get there now, but I think they use the term mainly to be rebellious. That's my opinion. Another fun one I see right now, and this is, we're almost done. And I really have to fight with this one a little bit because I do understand it a lot more than the average person. I mean, I'm not a full alchemist yet, but I'm working on it. And it's alchemy and the alchemist. It's a term that's thrown around way too much, in my opinion. Honestly, Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, is one of the more interesting versions of it. And I really do believe that that is more accurate than some of the other stuff I'm seeing out there right now, as far as mainstream goes. This is being thrown... It's being thrown too much. It's too common. And alchemy is not something that's a common thing. It's not for a common person. And I'm not saying that a common person can't use it, but to use alchemy, you become uncommon. That's just how it works. Because the deeper meaning is lost under a cloak of, it's a mental practice. I'm using it to change my emotions. Well, that's step one. You got that down. Do you know about the rest of it? In modern spiritual terms, it's being used to mean changing your emotions into something positive. Fine. By definition, alchemy is a form of chemistry and speculative philosophy practiced in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period, concerned principally with discovering methods for transmuting baser metals into gold and finding a universal solvent and an elixir of life. Well, that's a lot of words. In practice, it's a physical, mental, and spiritual practice that changes the spiritual essence of baser items, lead or our physical bodies, into higher frequencies, the gold or light bodies. It's both physical and spiritual pursuit. And when you meld the physical and the spiritual, the mind doesn't get the option, it's coming along for the ride. The fake news is that alchemists were charlatans to enrich themselves. There were some of those. I will not deny that. But truth seekers were actually trying to find ways to cure diseases, extend life, and for themselves to create the body of light that is able to leave the physical world and remanifest at will wherever they choose. It's also basically a merging with your highest aspect of your soul to really and truly create that divine connection in a way that most people who use the term today do not understand. Alchemy is an extremely amazing thing to research and to practice. I've practiced with herbal stuff for about 15 years now, and I will say that it does make a difference, and it does, as you're doing it, you notice you're working on a medium out in front of you, a substance in front of you. But while you're going through processes with your product in front of you, your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body is changing with that because you're putting your energy, your essence into it. And it's definitely something to look into, but you need to make sure to have the dedication because it is not a fly-by-night type thing. It is a decision to do. So let's bounce away from all the heavy stuff for a minute and we'll end the video. On a way less depressing note, let's define psychic. A lot of terms, medium, channeler, are couched under the term psychic. A psychic can be relating to soul or mind, mental phenomena, or outside of scientific knowledge. Well, there's a lot of that. Relating to non-physical or an agency, or someone who is sensitive to influences or forces of a non-physical or supernatural nature. So seeing auras, any form of energy healing, all of them, and spirit communication all fall under the term psychic. Psychic is a catch-all for pretty much all of your metaphysical terms outside of magical pursuits, although magical pursuits and psychic terms tend to overlap in a lot of ways. So, these are just a few of the things that I have studied over the years and figured out and looked at and I've seen used incorrectly a lot. And hopefully this is a little bit more clarity I can bring to it. I do have some other ideas for future videos along this line. If you guys are interested, let me know in the comments below. And like the video if you appreciate or at least enjoyed this. And feel free to subscribe. I do appreciate that. I'm trying to build my little channel here. And so this is not so much a disclaimer, but this is my advice when you're looking into studying some of the spiritual practices that I will probably be talking about over time with this channel. That's my goal anyway. To claim a title, like the ones above or the ones I'll discuss later, means something. A lot of these terms go back centuries, if not millennia, thousands of years. When you claim a name, you're bringing that past into your path. You are tapping into the flow of that spiritual energy. To claim a title like a witch or a wizard or an alchemist or any of the rest of them affects you on a metaphysical level. There are practices and knowledge that you have to learn and use when you step into those flows. It's not something that you just wake up one day and I'm going to do that without any training or practice. You're going to have a problem. Everyone does. We all trip and fall. I did. I know friends of mine have. We've learned, we've expanded, and now we can take on those titles if we choose. A lot of us don't because it's just more convenient not to. But to claim one of those titles, you do actually have to understand what goes along with it. Taking those lessons, expanding your knowledge, sending them forward into the future if that is the path that you choose. When you tap into that and connect to those names, that's exactly what you're doing, is you're bringing the past forward, you're enhancing it, and you're sending it into the future. This is not to say not to do it. This is telling you, be prepared. This is a big step, but it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. And if you're on a spiritual journey, put in the time. Practice, study, practice some more, study some more, go over it again if you didn't get it the first time. If you join a group, follow the syllabus to the letter. Find a mentor who will help you understand it better. As you gain knowledge, share your knowledge. If you're in a group, follow the rules of the group with the next generation. Respect those titles, degrees, and positions. They've been there. They know. They want to help you if you're willing to listen. Be respectful in your practice, showing your lineage that you are in what is one that is ethical and moral, and you will go very far if you put in the practice and the work. So, hopefully this wasn't too boring for you. And like I said, if this is something that you're interested in seeing more of, go ahead and let me know in the comments. I am going to be going over some of the different groups at a later time, maybe just interspersing them randomly because there's a lot of information about them, and I'll try to condense it into shorter videos. This one went a little long, but I will talk to you guys at a later date, and thank you so much for showing up.